Our neighbor's bees caused $5,000 in damages. They ended up paying $15,000. Welcome back to Reddit Court Files, where we pull real stories from Reddit and put them on trial. Today's case comes from Ars Legal Advice. Quick note, nothing in this video is legal advice. We're storytellers, not lawyers. Now let's get into it. Asked 1, the wrong. For 4 grueling years, a homeowner in Pennsylvania found themselves living under siege, their property overrun by an enemy that few took seriously: honeybees. Not just a few bees, not a nuisance, but an infestation so vast it defied belief. When they tried to explain, to convey the sheer scale of the problem, they were met with blank stares, dismissal, or outright ridicule. Mentioning a bee infestation meant you were a huge baby who just didn't like bees. Daring to say hundreds of thousands of bees made you either an exaggerator or incredibly stupid, unless you were an apiarist who simply nodded and said, "Yep, that sounds right." And God forbid you mentioned wanting to remove honeybees. Then you were instantly branded a war criminal, akin to Stalin or Mussolini. The source of this buzzing nightmare was their neighbor's house, specifically, a monstrous hive nested within its walls. They tried everything: animal control, who claimed it wasn't their purview; repeated complaints to the city's non-emergency service, many of which seemed to vanish into the ether without creating an actual case. Lawyers were consulted, but not hired. Local government officials were contacted, to no avail. The absentee landlord, owner of the neighboring property, offered only radio silence despite previous responsiveness on other issues. Over the years, the situation spiraled. They had 2 dogs, one an older, perhaps less discerning canine. It would routinely binge on the buffet of dead bees littering their porch and yard. The other, a newer addition, was terrified, barking almost constantly at the never-ending stream of insects. The backyard became a no-go zone, unusable for their pets or themselves. The husband was stung all the time, a regular pincushion. The homeowner herself narrowly avoided countless stings, finding half-dead bees tangled in blankets, a constant reminder of the encroaching threat. Friends and family with bee allergies couldn't even visit, essentially cutting them off from a significant part of their social life for nearly a decade. The frustration mounted, boiling over into a desperate resignation. Her husband said, "Well, guess we're stuck with the bees." But she wasn't ready to give up. Ace 2, the fight. Desperation began to brew, giving way to a new kind of resolve. She launched another round of appeals, driven by a quiet, determined scheming. Then, something finally shifted. Last year, she placed her yearly complaint, and for reasons unknown, it was finally made into an official case. Excitement, however, was quickly followed by a shock. A letter arrived in the mail, informing her that her house had severe structural issues with its soffits, and she had 30 days to fix them. She didn't even know what a soffit was. The letter contained the inspector's number, a man she would come to know as Kenny. She called him, not to yell, but to understand. What was a soffit? Was it important? Was her family in danger? And most importantly, had he not seen the bees? It turned out Kenny, somehow, had entirely missed the hundreds of thousands of bees. He'd inspected on a cold, rainy day when the bees were inactive. He looked at the neighbor's wall, saw nothing, then turned and noticed her funky soffits. It was the equivalent of a government ticket. He was kind, though, giving her contractor suggestions. It would cost $12,000 for the soffit repairs and related roof work, a bitter pill to swallow when the real problem across the street remained. But Kenny also promised to return on a warm day to properly assess the bees. She was terrified. What if the swarm split? What if the weather changed? She wouldn't leave it to chance. She compiled an arsenal of evidence: lists of bee stings received over the years, photos of countless dead bees scattered across her home, even a picture of her dog's terrified face after yet another dead bee buffet. All of this she sent to Kenny. Months passed, and the bee situation only worsened. The new dog barked constantly, and both dogs were trapped indoors. The stings continued, the social isolation persisted. The desperation reached a fever pitch. A few months ago, she decided if the system wouldn't work, she would. She enlisted the help of a friend who dreamed of being a vigilante, a Mason friend's husband, her reluctant brother-in-law, and her enthusiastic gremlin cousin. They spent a few $100s on quick-mix concrete, buckets, gloves, and a tarp. The insane plan: wait for a cold day, lay the tarp, and hurl globs of concrete at the hive entrance. She knew it was crazy, knew it would be difficult, knew she could get in serious trouble, and knew the bees would likely just find another exit, perhaps inside the neighbor's house, which, in her desperate mind, was a problem for the landlord's complicit friends. They set the date, bought the supplies, and prepared for a desperate, illegal act. Asked 3, the win. A few days before the planned concrete assault, there was a knock at the door. It was a man, saying they were there to get rid of the bee infestation, and could they use her driveway? She didn't hesitate. "Yes, take my driveway, my firstborn, whatever you want, just get rid of the bees." Earlier today she checked her email. Case updated. Kenny did it. The beautiful bastard did it. The beehive, the source of 9 years of misery, was finally being removed. Having gone through the process herself with the soffit violation, she understood exactly what the slumlord next door had been put through. Being served a notice of violation is a huge hassle. You get a tiny time frame to act, or you're off to court to show progress. You have to contact contractors, get quotes, check local legislation, and spend a buttload of money. Everything she'd been doing for years because of their bees, they now had to do themselves. The relief was immense. She could finally use her porch again. Her husband would stop getting stung. Friends and family with bee allergies, shut out for a decade, could finally come visit. This niche case had a simple, if hard-won, resolution. So, what did it ultimately take to get rid of the bees? $12,000 out of pocket for her own house's repairs, about 40 bee stings to her husband, 2 traumatized dogs, and the difficult decision to disinvite her cousin George from the family reunion due to his planned involvement in the concrete scheme. But most importantly, it took persistence. Turns out, all it takes is one city government worker who believes in what they're doing to push a case through, and that squeaky wheel approach, even over years, can eventually find that one person. That's the verdict on today's case. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Was justice served? Make sure to subscribe so you never miss a filing.